If you're anything like me, every time I ride somewhere and realise I've forgotten my bike lock, to stop it getting stolen, I always end up having to bury it and then leave a urine scent trail to mark its location. But it seems like lately the thieves are getting smarter. So with bike theft on the increase, today I'm going to build the world's most powerful bike thief trap. Thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. So yeah, recently I've had a bike stolen. But I've always wondered about some kind of seat trap. Looking online, it appears other people have had similar ideas. But between them being too slow, too obvious, or just too much like my average weekend, I don't think anyone's got it right yet. So let's head out to the shed and see what we can do. So my plan is to completely rebuild the center post of the bike. We'll use a thick tube which will house a long heavy duty spring. Concealed above that, we'll make a heavy steel piston which will hold the spike and keep it straight as it travels at high speed to Browntown. Plus give it enough inertia to overcome any obstacles it encounters along the way, like pelvic bones or even concrete. This will be held down by some kind of latch or some shit. Then to compress the spring, which will be nearly impossible, I have absolutely no idea because I'm really excited about building the first part. Now this extravagant masterpiece is my pride and joy, and has been my trusted steel steed since deciding to do this video right now. I found it on Marketplace for $20, which was a great deal because it's exactly $20 above market value, which is why I went back later that night and stole it. It features cataracts, has 15 speeds to choose from, all of which are different variations of slow, but it's not only the 1990s paint job that won me over, but also that it's made out of this chocolate, which is the only material I can weld. Now for the spring, the most heavy duty compact one I can think of would be from a pogo stick, and looking back at my pogo stilt crutch build video, they actually look like they're the perfect size. Plus I know they can lift an adult. The pogo sticks that I bought for that video are no longer sold anymore, so we're going to have to borrow one back from them for now. So we just need to pull this bolt out and we should have a nice greasy elephant pube. And holding that up against the bike, it should actually be the perfect length. Then to serve as a center post tube, I have some muffler tubing, which is almost the perfect fit to house the spring. Then hopefully we can use a smaller diameter tube inside to act as the piston. With the spring in there, I thought I would just give it a bit of a sample, and this is honestly going to be ridiculously hard to compress this spring, and it's going to be stupidly dangerous to go anywhere near it when it is set. I gave the center post a bit of a sand so we can paint it later to blend in with the bike. Then drilled a hole through the bottom, which we can place a bolt through, which will stop the spring from firing into the earth. Now I'm going to make up the piston to go inside it. I don't know if that's a good proper engineering name for whatever I'm making, but it sounds industrious, so we'll roll with it. Yeah, feel free to leave the proper terminology in the comments. I always appreciate that. Now, you all know how much I hate circles because they are a pain in the ass to cut out. But here we are again. This is the thickest plate I have in the shed, which will be great for strength and add some good weight to the device. I realise this project will require a lot of cutting, so I've installed this bucket to catch the sparks. Because as you probably already know, sparks is what electricity is made out of. So rather than wasting them on the floor, I'll now be able to put them back into the grid to reduce my power bill. After a painful amount of cutting and grinding, I ended up with these two fat steel coins, which should fit nicely in the tube. And dropping them in there, they gave this satisfying effect, which distracted me for a while. I wanted to use this wide tube for the rest of the piston, but there's nowhere for a latch to grab onto it, so I've gone with this smaller piece instead. Then we just need to weld it perfectly in the middle. Then after a bit of a cleanup, we have this nice shiny spindle. Then I've drilled a hole at both ends so we can weld the spike all the way through. But in case the project doesn't work out, I've realised it'll be a great upmarket cotton reel. I feel like there's some physics here, and science. So much science. I've then test fitted it on the rod and got this nice smooth sliding action, which will be similar to how well it should slide through a bike seat and a large intestine. For the spike, I'm going to use this thick stainless steel rod. I cut the rod to length and then ended up with this cool fidget toy. Then I ruined it by welding the spike in place. To make it a little bit rounder and smooth out the welds, I used this lathe that I bought on Marketplace. Then I ended up with this cool looking futuristic Harry Potter motherfucking wand thing, which for some reason I thought it would be fun to smash eyes with. Before I sharpened the spike, we can now test fit the piston in the tube. Weirdly, it was a bit rusty from 10 years worth of weather exposure, but using a technique I developed on your mum last night, I was able to get it nice and smooth. We can then test fit it in with the spring, and that length has worked out perfectly, but again, I'm really concerned with how strong the spring is. I've then made up a nice thick steel end cap, which will go on top of the tube, and then welded the out of it, because if this thing cracks, the whole thing is going to go firing into the air. Yeah, I reckon it's going to be hitting this top end cap pretty hard. But now we can work out some kind of latch mechanism. So I've made up this thick steel hook, which will hopefully grab onto the piston after we press it down. I honestly don't have any alternative plans if this fails. I welded some tabs on and then just tested it by pulling on the spike. And that seems to be holding now, except the spring is going to have a lot more force on it. So we'll see. So to trigger it, my thought is we'll use a steel rod which will run down the side of it and connect to the bike seat. So I just welded some nuts on the side to guide the rod through. Then I've got a little return spring in there to help reset the seat. We can now put the spring in and see if everything's shaping up.
Oh,
yeah, I forgot there was a latch holding it. With no plan still on how I'm going to compress the spring, I've just put a bolt through temporarily and left most of the spring hanging out. And that's allowed me to be able to push the spike in just a little bit to see if the latch works. So just getting this spike in a few centimeters was proving pretty difficult. I thought I'd try to get the latch to engage on the table. Yeah, that trigger is going to be pretty volatile. I also realised for testing I could vary the power by just turning the spring. I finally managed to get the latch to engage and then gave it a little test.
jeez.
And that is shaping up pretty good, especially considering it's only about 5% power at the moment. I then thought it would be a good idea to see how well it would serve as a hole punch. Alright, we need to get this thing to full power, so it's time to get it mounted on the bike. So we're going to remove the seat and this centre tube. The bike came with a bike lock, which is in the way, and it has no key, but luckily I'm a lock-picking expert. To unlock these, all you need is a bobby pin. If you have any females in your house, you should find these everywhere, as they leave them as territorial markings. But these are made out of spring steel, which is great for picking locks. All you need to do is fashion it into a shape like this, then insert 2 of them into the lock, and the lock should then easily pop open with an angle grinder. I've then removed the seat. This will be mounted about here. I had to weld some tabs onto the bottom, but the sparks from the welder burning the seat seem to release the smell of 20 years worth of sitting on it. And you get the idea. When someone sits on top, the seat will rock backwards and press on our trigger rod. To allow the seat to press on the rod, it turns out the perfect shape is this, which seems to be appropriate, as when the thief sits on it, they get to see Jesus. Then we can drill a hole in the seat for the spike. This seemed dumb, but putting a piece of chalk on it and lightly setting it off worked out great for working out the position of the hole. I then set the spring to about 5% power again and gave it an alignment test. Yeah, okay, the prospect of sitting on this thing is really starting to make me feel uneasy, because I feel like it's not quite long enough. So I've extended it, and then we can give it a bit of a sharpen. I've just put a chisel-shaped head on it for now, until we work out how we're going to compress the spring. Time to get this thing mounted on the bike. I got the centre post cut out, welded up a shitty looking yoke to hold the bottom, greased up the spike, put the spring in and bolted it up. I've then finally reattached the seat. We are then left with this beautiful machine. So this spring is going to be holding a crap load of energy when it's fully compressed. So to safely compress it, inspired by methods that definitely aren't me and my mates doing a number of backyard four-wheel drive lifts, I reckon if we have a length of heavy steel down the side of the device, and then a hydraulic car jack, we should be able to fairly easily press the spring into place. Now trying to get the spike to balance on top of the jack is going to be stupidly dangerous and could blow out sideways at any given time. So to firmly hold it in place, I'm going to weld up a thing like this. Hideous abomination of a thing, which will go on top of the spike like this. I've then welded up this holder, which will hook around the bottom. So if we put the coupling on top of the spike and then put the jack in, we should be able to give it a go. I've then realised that this piece of crap jack just doesn't quite push in far enough. And if I weld it so the jack is closer, I'm not going to be able to get the jack onto the spike. So then it was time for a laydown, because I've completely given up on this piece of shit. The next day I had the realisation that I might be able to make an F-clamp that could be strong enough to push the spike in. It would just need to be a really big version, like size 48 font. So I picked up some thick threaded rod and some nuts and welded them in place. And then realised the rod was completely jammed in there, So I cut the nuts off and re-welded them, and then it was jammed again. It was then time for another little laydown. But I then realised the heat was probably warping it and making the nuts jammed. So I found if I aimlessly crushed it in the vise, it just started working. We could then finally give it a try on the bike and see if we can get this spring compressed. So how this works is the clamp hooks around onto the bottom, and then I've also added this side restraint bolt to stop the whole thing rocketing sideways if something breaks. And then we have a tube that is packed full of grease that goes between the stabby bit and the spinny bit. So then if we put the drill on here, we should be able to squish the spike into place. And that's shaping up really well. And bingo, the latch is locked into place. So while doing this, I realised there is something that I completely didn't allow for, and that's the possibility that the whole thing could jam up inside. And if that does happen, there's no way I'm going to try and open it. We'll probably just have to move out and leave the bike here, so we can now give it its first test. So now we just need to carefully remove the spring compressor, take the coupling off the end spike, and delicately turn off the safety. And then we can see if we can get it to activate. And that was ridiculously loud, but that worked great. I was half expecting the whole top of the pipe to shear off. Looks like all the welds have held up, so that's good. I then reassembled the whole thing with extra grease inside and gave it a nice paint job of laserized black to blend in with the bike aesthetic. And then gave it a few more tests.
That was loud. Holy
I really had trouble capturing just how loud this was. The steel on steel impact sound is so jarring. Okay, yeah, so one major issue is the latch just sometimes wouldn't hold after you set it. This is it triggering itself with just the safety stopping it from going off. So I had to rework a whole bunch of parts, but then it was good, mostly. And just for a bit of cinematic effect, I've added some chalk. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to set off, but with the weight of an adult human, this shouldn't be a problem at all. In the slow-mo, I noticed that the spike actually rotates when it deploys, a bit like a corkscrew that assists with constipation. So I'm really not happy with this chisel head on our spike, so it's time to cut this into a true vampire-style backdoor spike. Then, just to protect the spike from getting blunt when setting it, I'm going to put a socket on top. Then as a final touch, I've rebranded the bike appropriately. We have the Anal Eliminator. I then thought it would be a good time to give Kristen a demonstration.
Jesus Christ. Was that meant to happen?
No. That was the socket I put on there so the spike wouldn't get damaged.
Oh.
Wonder how fast that came off. Okay, I'll try to remember to remove that next time because that came off like a bullet. And now there's a round dent in the roof of the shed. Plus I don't want the thief to get my 10mm socket. It's now time to give this a power test against different targets. But in resetting the seat, I've just noticed the spike isn't the only thing that stops thieves. There's also this, which is today's sponsor, Incogni. Just like thieves want to collect and resell your bike, there are thousands of companies out there that like to collect and resell your personal data. About 6 months ago, I actually had to ditch one of my personal email accounts because it just got absolutely hammered with spam. And I'm pretty sure it must be from online shopping I've done in the past because some of it was way too specific. But it's not just online shopping where your details get leaked. My personal email address has been leaked in about 12 data breaches that I know of from companies over the years. And once your data is out there, they resell it to other companies, and then your phone and your email inbox just gets flooded with spam. But did you know legally you have the right to request that they remove your personal data from their system? But to do this yourself would take years. So that's where Incogni comes into the picture. When you sign up with them, they do all the messy work for you. So this is my dashboard, and they have sent 260 requests so far. That is an estimated time saving for me of 111 hours if I was to try and tackle it myself, and that allows me to focus on more important things. Incogni have also just launched their new custom removals feature too, in their unlimited and family unlimited plans. So if you find a site yourself that has your personal information, you just send Incogni the link and they'll sort it out for you. So if you want to reclaim your privacy, just head to incogni.com/Turner and use the code Turner to get a massive 60% off. Protecting your bike is smart. but protecting your personal identity is smarteriest. That is incogni.com/Turner. I then thought it would be interesting to see how sensitive the trigger was by throwing an old sun-perished volleyball at it. It's stuck. It went off no worries at all, and it was quick enough to catch the ball. It was a perfect hit. Stepping up the test a notch, it's probably a good idea that we try it on a harder target to see how it would perform against bone. 3, 2, 1. Holy shit. That was way more dramatic than I thought.
Flew past my head.
God damn. Oh, there's bits everywhere. This is the bit that flew past Kristen's head. Right, let's try this out on my lazy attempt at making ballistics gel. Yes, it's just red water in a bottle, which when you think about it is kind of similar to what humans are made of. 3, 2, 1. Wow, I didn't expect it to go through so clean. We just missed it with the slow-mo, but this red mist is fun. It keeps the blood in, because it plugs it perfectly. So you have to stay there.
Yeah, it's...
Oh no, it's going in there.
That's a perfect hole, really, isn't it?
So this made me realise that the spike perhaps goes in a little bit too clean, which was even more evident on this next test with compressed air. 1. I was really hoping the bottle would burst for a bit of fun. However, it punches through it so cleanly, it just turned it into a rocket. To give it a test against something with a bit more resistance, I thought I'd try chopping some wood with it. 1. That was stronger than I thought.
So it cut it?
It took a piece off the side, yeah, I just don't think I had it straight. I'll give it another go. 1. I think I kept moving the bike every time I would pull on the trigger string. Oh, it's gone. It's just stuck in there. But then finally on the 4th attempt, we got it to hit on the target. But that's gone in nice and deep. So if you forget your axe, you could probably chop wood with this if you turn your bike upside down. It was then time for some preliminary human trials with our good mate Tubesy, who you may remember from the car thief defense system video and our World War II death ray tests. So his original fiberglass legs are a bit stiff for getting him into the bike mounting position we wanted. So we made him up some new bendable legs. And I carved him up a fresh backside out of polystyrene, which should be a fairly good substitute for human thief meat. We then installed that in his pants with the blood pack just for the test. And then we just needed some way to lift our thief up and lower him onto the bike. Yes, the YouTube algorithm gods are definitely not going to like this visual. But they should keep in mind this is just a human-sized marionette.
That's quite frightening if somebody came into the shed right now.
That looks really sus. With the bike in position, we could then test out our anal eliminator with our thief. He's too far forward and has no weight. He's mating with the bike. I repositioned the bike and we gave it another go. The position is pretty good, but you got to keep in mind that Tubesy only weighs about 5 kilograms, which I think converts to about 11 ladybug shells in American. I think I need to weight him up. Shit, that was loud. It has gone in really deep. He's stuck there. Look at the ground.
Jumped. Oh, ground. Oh, that's disturbing.
Okay, so after a fair bit of thought, these next few shots are probably a bit too graphic for YouTube. Even though it's just Tubesy's red coolant, I really don't want to get the video restricted or something, so for those who are keen, I'll upload these shots in all their gory details separately. I'll drop a link in the description for you guys. How deep is that? That's... Oh! That's so disturbing. Oh! I didn't actually expect it to get so perfectly in the right spot. So having a good look later, I noticed that not only did the spike position perfectly both times and nail him right in the nugget nostril, it's actually gone all the way through and just clipped this steel plate. So this definitely would not be a good day for our bike thief. Also, if they did survive, I'm now curious what their next step might be. Try and stand up, or just ride straight to the bicycle removal ward at the local hospital. I also noticed that Spike was somehow getting longer, so I pulled it apart just to see what was going on.
Holy
So it's actually broken the weld at the top and started to pancake the tube, which has formed this ridge all the way around. After I reassembled it, it was time for a bike lock-free trip to the shops. But then I realised the reality of this whole design, and that's the fact that you need to ride this while it's fully loaded up with energy. Even though there's a safety bolt, well, you've seen my welds, I couldn't get the confidence up to actually give it a ride. And the only alternative is trying to sit in front of the spike and taking a battery drill and large spring compressor everywhere I go. But from here, I'm really keen to try this out on some other materials like concrete, possibly with a hardened steel tip as well. If you want to see something like that, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with your ideas. Don't actually ever try and build or use something like this, and I'll catch you all next time.